Keep 'em both in the top. Keep 'em both in the top.
Carmi, welcome to the show, and we apologize for the small technical error when we were in Washington, D.C. A few days ago.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
All right, so let's talk some civil rights questions. I suppose on the top of many people's minds, including mine, are the civil rights of D.C. residents who are the victims of horrendous crime rates that would put D.C. Above the murder rates of most failed states. And it's data that we've talked about regularly on this show. The vast preponderance of victims are black. The assailants are black. If you say Black Lives Matter, then of course you would want to get DC cleaned up. That would be your top priority, but it doesn't seem to be the priority of Democrats. Why?
Well, Benny, we're seeing this type of situation throughout the United States. There's these Soros prosecutors. They're not enforcing the laws. The law themselves have become weak because people have come to hate the police and love chaos. And so this is what you get. But DC has long been a bastion of failed government, like Chicago and other places. We really failed the African-American community, like you said. It is spilling over all over. I was almost mugged twice this week, one after the other, in the middle of DC, about 3 blocks away from the White House just 2 days ago. And so, no one is safe in the city. And I am, for one, as a DC resident, while I'm serving in the Department of Justice, I'm grateful for the president stepping up. And so this is really a law enforcement issue. And so now, instead of the namby-pamby pulling of punches, you're actually going to have federal law enforcement take effect here. And that means this lunatic who threw a Subway sandwich, believe it or not, he was a DOJ contractor. This nut who threw a sandwich at law enforcement yesterday has been swiftly arrested and is going to be prosecuted. He's been fired, needless to say. And we're going to see that all over the place.
Okay, so 2 quick things that you said there that just blew my mind. One, you've only been in DC for a short while, just you could count the months, and you've already been victim of crimes?
Well, look, I stepped out of the way, but a homeless person rushed me 2 days ago as I was walking back to the office from an appointment. And a second one harassed me and tried to grab my water bottle. I mean, these are not like, I wasn't hurt, and I am from San Francisco too. I think you alluded to that in your prior hit. So my head is always on a swivel in these urban environments, but you can't walk a few blocks without being harassed and feel unsafe. And, as a woman, you're particularly sensitive to these issues. And so it's even the case in very nice neighborhoods. I live in a nice neighborhood, and I've driven past crime tape blocking off my, adjoining street twice. I pulled over in one instance to say, "What's going on here, officer?" "Oh, there was a murder right here." I don't know if it was a drive-by, stray bullets or whatever, in a very nice neighborhood where members of Congress and other people live. That's why I chose that neighborhood. So literally nothing is safe here in this city.
Nothing is safe here, even if you're a DOJ contractor. We have the video that you alluded to of, I'm not sure what it would be classified as, but I think if you throw anything at a police officer that could hurt or harm them, that would be considered assault at the very least. Here's the video. You're telling me that the man in the salmon-colored shirt here is a DOJ contractor?
Yes, the man in the salmon-colored shirt with the effete gesture there of throwing a Subway sandwich was a DOJ contractor. He is no longer.
Incredible. And can you give us any further circumstance here? He's just attacking the police out of what? Blind rage, out of anger that they
solidarity
exist?
Let me tell you something.
Yes.
Woke leftists all over the United States have come to believe the rhetoric that somehow, he's a white man, clearly they're oppressors and they need to somehow pay penance for that. So they engage in stupid stunts like this, and that could have hurt somebody. That could have hit an officer in the eye and wounded them, or worse. Or he could have had a projectile in there. So we have zero tolerance for that kind of nonsense. Nobody should feel comfortable attacking our law enforcement. And, he's a moron and he'll pay the price for that.
Wow. Just as a perfect demonstration of the rot inside of some of the law enforcement agencies and the Justice Department in Washington, D.C., just perfectly captured in that. Here's the headline: DC man charged with felony assault after hitting federal agent with Subway sandwich. Okay. I think that his bail will not be set at $5 footlong. I doubt in DC. But many have told us that we won't be able to get. You can put all the law enforcement you want on the streets of Washington, but if you don't have prosecutors and if you don't have a court system and judges who are willing to put criminals in prison, then it'll never be fixed. Do you see that as an unfixable problem, Harmeet?
No, nothing is an unfixable problem. We have the ultimate problem solver in the White House. I'm very confident that the president, working together with other law enforcement and leaders, is going to solve this problem. And the problem, however, is a national problem. And we're going to have to convince state and local officials that betraying their constituents is a bad idea. They haven't had to pay the price for that, but I think if you're a young child, African-American child in Chicago, your risk of getting shot in a drive-by shooting is unacceptable in America. I do think that's a civil rights violation. It's a civil rights issue, and there's an utter failure throughout the country. There's only a few of us here at the DOJ. We're doing our best. It's whack-a-mole all day here, but local. We have a system of federalism here, so local and state officials need to step up and keep their people safe or get voted out of office.
Yeah, there does seem to be quite a rash of this. Something that we have worked on is the poor woman that was laid out flat in Cincinnati, who's punched by a mob and then left for dead, and as everybody knows, may have well been killed, because when you hit the concrete and you're unconscious, that's how you get a brain hemorrhage and you die on the spot. Her name is Holly. We've raised nearly $1 million for her in a Give, Send, to Go, and we're proud to have helped her. But nonetheless, this is something that is clearly is quite sparked in Cincinnati. The fact that there were no police officers there, the fact that she had to take an Uber to the hospital, and that the cops just sort of like brushed by it. It just seems like our cities have been abandoned to become hellscape kill zones for Americans, and we don't want that, obviously.
No.
How do you fight against this, Harmeet?
Well, so in this particular case, DOJ is looking at it, and so I'm not going to comment on it. We are in touch with Holly, and it's a very concerning situation. Again, this is the classic situation that I just described. There's a left-wing mayor. He doesn't believe in law enforcement. The local authorities similarly have a lax attitude towards these types of wilding incidents that occur regularly in Cincinnati. And, my gosh, I wouldn't have thought of Cincinnati as a place where you can walk around safely after dark, yet we can all see the footage of what happened there. And there's a racial element to it, in my opinion. And so, we're going to be looking at that as the more facts roll in an investigation and see what we can do about it. But ultimately, the solution for this is the voters at the ballot box. And so that's why we're so motivated to make sure that our elections are secure as well, so that we have outcomes that are actually what the people want.
Yes. It does seem, the more that we read into the rap sheets of those who attacked Holly in Cincinnati, who is an unarmed middle-aged woman who's just trying to celebrate a birthday and was left for dead, literally left for dead, while people filmed and cheered it on. And that's something that I just can't get out of my mind. It's what inspired us to go try and raise some money for her, is because, everybody just stood around and laughed as she was left for dead. I mean, it's just like animal cruelty, truly. It's the banality of evil. And everyone was filming and nobody even called the cops.
Yeah.
And
that's a cultural issue. I think we have this TikTok culture. It is an international cultural problem that people are more interested in filming than engaging, and are really separated from their fellow humans. So I would love to see a culture where we go back to more community involvement, faith. These are how we connect with each other as human beings. And, people are getting divorced from that with this TikTok and online culture.
Yes. Some of the individual who led some of the assaults was out on bail for like a felony list as long as my arm. And they just, in Cincinnati, they just $400 bail. You just let them out.
I mean, look, the bail system is a other scandal in our country. When I was in California in private practice, I got involved in this issue. Kamala Harris refused to defend an attack on California's bail system, money bail system, which, meaningfully kept criminals waiting trial behind bars, and or some security for them to show up. And that's been eliminated in California for the most part at the state level now, thanks to law enforcement like the Kamala Harrises of the world, siding with the offenders and not the citizens. And so this is a problem, needs to be tackled nationally.
One story that we haven't talked about in a while, and I guess we'll go to trial a year from now, but it's Karmelo Anthony in Texas in the stabbing of Austin Metcalf. I wanted to get your take on this. Just have you been read in on this case? There also seems to be a racialized element here. The way that Karmelo Anthony has been treated, for instance, released, allowed to graduate, family takes the give and go money and moves into a mansion. It seems like just a insult, quite frankly, to law and justice, as this young man is now dead, that he stabbed and killed for, well, I'm not even sure. Absolutely nothing as far as I can tell. And according to all available footage, and it is captured on camera. Have you seen any of that footage? Do you intend on monitoring or looking into this case?
Well, look, I can't really comment about that, but I will tell you that our model, generally speaking, is the DOJ will get involved in cases where there is a federal element to it, where local authorities haven't properly taken care of it. So I'm going to suspend judgment until we see the outcome of this case. When minors are involved, there are different legal standards, and there are jurisdictional thresholds we have to meet in every case. But I'm looking at every case that I see. I'm online a lot, as you know, and constantly sending leads to my folks. We look at cases sometimes. This happened just today. We look at cases. I said, "Oh my gosh, that's horrible. Tell me what happened." We get a hold of the FBI, make sure they sit in on the interviews, and then the evidence comes back. And my conclusion is, that was a bad situation. It doesn't meet the thresholds for us to get involved under the federal statutes that we govern. So we are the Department of Justice, not the Department of Prosecution. So it is our duty as prosecutors to ensure that we are selecting the cases appropriately and doing justice. And I'll just leave it at that.
Okay. Well, it's wonderful to hear, though, at the very least, because obviously justice for Americans means justice for all Americans, and it should show no favor. And you brought up something, and I know we're up against a hard out, but I'm so excited that you brought this up because it's something that has been a bee in our bonnet for a long time. And it's come forward into the news cycle, the defrauding of Americans and our voices and our vote. You brought up election security and how important it is that elections are run righteously and honestly and transparently. And with so much of the everything from the Russiagate and Obamagate scandals. I know we've had two guests on, the head of the Intel Committee and Daryl Issa, but we're both on talking about how really what happened there was the will of the American people was defrauded, that the decision to elect Donald Trump was undermined by a very villainous, many would argue criminal cabal in Washington, D.C. to kneecap President Trump. And I have so many close friends that are in the administration 1 and in administration 2. And man, they would tell you, man, if you were to order Russian vodka or like get a Russian salad dressing, on your salad at Morton's in D.C., you could be indicted for that in term 1. That's how perilous this hoax was when launched against the Trump administration. It truly robbed the American people of their voice and their will. And it's a dark time in American history. How are you approaching this issue? Do you see it as a civil rights issue? The security of our elections?
Well, there's a couple of aspects to that. So first of all, we at the Civil Rights Division are charged under federal law with administering the federal election law statutes. They include, without limitation, Help America Vote Act, National Voter Registration Act, the Voting Rights Act, and the Overseas and Military Voters Act. And there's a couple others, but that's at the very top of the pyramid. But the vast majority of our election laws are at the state level, and the state legislatures are responsible for drafting those. During COVID, Courts hijack that function, governors hijack that function, attorneys general hijack that function. They shoved mail voting down everybody's throats. That's become permanent in many states without it being voted on by the voters. And so it's a convoluted system. So we're not, we much as I would love to fix all the voting situation in America, I can't because I don't have jurisdiction over that. But the second layer that you just talked about is also a civil rights issue. There is something called a conspiracy to violate rights. And this dates back to the era when slaves were newly freed and law enforcement officials conspired to deprive them of their civil rights, to vote, to own property, to drive around, to be full Americans. And so that's how far back this right goes. And so today, and people talk about Watergate. Watergate was playing patty cakes. It was personal, petty corruption at a pretty small level compared to what you're just describing. A conspiracy to deprive the American people of their rightful choice for president. And I think we're naive if we think it stopped with that. I think there is an ongoing lack of concern for the rights of American citizens to select their own elected officials. In the case of the hatred for President Trump, combined with raw greed for power, has led to massive civil rights violations. Many of our friends, Benny, you know, and I know people whose rights are personally violated. I mean, you know, I won't call them out, but people who had to survive dawn raids. Lawyers in this building in the Department of Justice had to have their children rousted out of bed before dawn and be humiliated in front of them for nothing, for giving legal advice, sometimes leading to no outcome. Lawyers have been disbarred. This lawfare is ongoing. Friends of mine have been subjected to this, and all of us who took jobs in this administration who are lawyers understood that that risk is there. And you know, that is why it is incredibly important that we put an end to it. And so I can tell you, the Attorney General, the President, and everyone who works here in this building is entirely 100% committed to ensuring that our elections are free and fair, and that elected officials, like people on, you know, in House Judiciary, I'm not going to name them because there's investigations ongoing, but elected people in the Congress do not get to deprive us of our lawful voice ever again. There must be consequences, and we're committed to that.
Yes, wonderful. I'm so glad that you, if I may, just very quick follow up to that, because you talked about the deprivation of rights in Reconstruction America, but the Supreme Court has taken up this race-based districting that has been used very effectively by like Eric Holder and Barack Obama in order to gerrymander, force legal gerrymandering through the courts. And the Supreme Court is now bringing it up. The article is on screen right here. Supreme Court considers ban on race-based voting districts. That seems like common sense to me. Does the Civil Rights Office have any take on this?
Well, of course, we're going to be expressing our view on this case. I've spoken about it quite a bit, and so you'll see some filings from our office in this case. But the big picture here is that the Voting Rights Act has been interpreted over decades to either allow or require race-based gerrymandering. And there was a time in our country in fairly recent history, 1950s and 60s included, where, you know, African Americans were denied the right to vote, and mainly in the South. This is 2025 today. It is not the case anymore. And so this is a vestige of a history, a shameful history that is long over in our country. And Justice Thomas eloquently wrote about this in his dissent from an opinion where this Supreme Court kicked the can down the road on this case. It'll now be heard in this next term. And he said, look, equal protection, which is a revered concept in our law, is at odds with Voting Rights Act jurisprudence that is race-based. And so this needs to be resolved by the Supreme Court. And so in this coming term, I hope it will be, and I hope we'll see an end to that. But to be clear, that's going to cause some challenges for people in both parties, because People who thought they had safe seats outside those racially gerrymandered districts are going to have to now compete fairly for everybody's vote, which I, as an American, think is a good thing. But it's going to upset the apple cart for some people. So I hope that happens. We don't know how the court's going to rule, but I think our direction is a good one, getting rid one by one of these racial barriers and these assumptions that people are going to vote a particular way because of their race. This itself is a racist concept. It's outdated. And in the case of Texas, it's not even true. There are many minorities being elected to the Republican Party in red states. It's a beautiful thing. We need to see more of it with open and fair elections. And so we at the DOJ will be weighing in on that.
We look forward to that, and we will read it live on the show. And we hope you will join us again. The great Harmeet Dillon with the Civil Rights Department, who is doing just truly God's work. Harmeet, it's hard to really look at your career and say nothing other than you're here for the right time in the right place. You're just such a warrior for justice in this nation. Everybody must follow Harmeet. Millions of Americans already do, and she's just such a tenacious fighter.
Can I add, Benny? Please follow my official account, which is
please.
AAG Dillon. I'd love to have more followers there. Thank you.
So she has 121,000 followers there. Everybody go follow the official account as well. Ladies and gentlemen, the great Harmeet Dillon. Godspeed.
Thank you.